Over 2.5 years ago, in October of 2020, I looked back at the first Child's Play film. And it's taken a while, but finally we're going to look at Child's Play 2, released November 9th, 1990, exactly 2 years after the first film was released. And fun fact, there was a shorter amount of time between these two films being released than there was the amount of time between my two reviews. And if you saw the first review, or if you've just seen Child's Play before but not this one, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, how could there be a Child's Play 2? Chucky died at the end of Child's Play. Well, he came back to life. Duh. Haven't you ever seen a slasher before? Yep, that's right. Chucky's back, and he is once again going after Andy Barclay, the now 8-year-old boy who he tortured in the first film. Same premise, really. Chucky's trying to take over Andy's body so he can become human again after putting himself in a doll at the beginning of the first film, but he notices that he's starting to become human within the doll, and he's running out of time to possess Andy. This film got a budget of $13 million, slightly more than the first film, but it made a bit less than the first film, $38.8 million, while the first film made $44.2. The film didn't do so well with critics because critics hate horror movies, but it did pretty well with people who actually like the Child's Play franchise. I mentioned that Andy is back, and so is his actor, Alex Vincent. Brad Dourif came back as the voice of Chucky, and we also added Christine Elise, Jenny Agutter, and Garrett Graham to the cast as well. So in his second go-around, was Chucky successful in trying to take over Andy's body? Well, we're gonna find out right now as we look at Child's Play 2, released in 1990. So our film begins 2 years after the events of the first film, where the burnt-to-a-crisp Chucky doll is being reassembled? Yes, that's right, the Good Guy Factory is reassembling Chucky in order to prove that, well, there's nothing wrong with it. Good luck with that. And sure enough, when they're putting the finishing touches on it, an electric shock comes out of the doll and murders one of the workers. Meanwhile, we go to Andy Barclay, now 8 years old, who's been placed in foster care after his mother was transferred to a psychiatric ward after she backed up his claims of the killer doll. It's also revealed Detective Mike Norris and the other cops from the first film did not back her up and instead feigned ignorance. What dicks. Back at the Good Guy Factory, company executive Mr. Sullivan is very pissed off over this death. He orders his assistant Madsen to cover the whole thing up and dispose of the Chucky doll. Back at the foster center, we meet the head Grace Poole, who is talking to Joanne and Phil Simpson, frequent fosters who are looking to adopt Andy for the time being. And I just want to mention a side note, Jenny Agutter, who plays Joanne, is a British actress, and it's very obvious. She tries her best to hide her accent, but you can very much tell. Anyway, Joanne seems keen on helping Andy, while Phil is a little reluctant, thinking Andy might need greater psychological help. They decide to take him anyway, and on their way home, they almost get killed by a good guy truck. How about that? They arrive at the Simpson house, where we meet their other foster named Kyle, who is 17 and in her last year of eligible care. And while Andy's exploring his new room, his trauma immediately gets reactivated as he finds a good guy doll. Only this one's called Tommy, and he's nice, I guess. Later that night, Madsen takes the good guy doll in his car to go dispose of it. Unbeknownst to him, it appears that electric shock has reanimated Chucky. While Madsen stops off to buy some liquor, Chucky gets on his car phone and calls Grace, posing as Andy's uncle, to find his whereabouts. After Madsen gets back in the car, Chucky holds him at gunpoint and forces him to drive to an empty lot. Turns out that gun was just a water gun though, ha 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 ha. But this is a real bag which he uses to smother Madsen to death. Chucky even arrives at the Simpson house and finds the Tommy doll, which he breaks using a family heirloom, which he also breaks, and then buries Tommy in the backyard. The next day, Phil finds the broken heirloom and grounds both Andy and Kyle after neither of them fess up to breaking it. And while they're stuck doing laundry together, they begin to form a bond. And after Andy overhears Phil considering sending him back to the foster care, because again he thinks he needs stronger psychological help, he decides to try to get over his fear and bond with the Tommy doll, not knowing that it's actually Chucky. He's gonna find that shit out real soon though, as that night Chucky ties him to his bed and begins performing the enchantment on him that's supposed to swap them bodies, but before he can complete it, Kyle comes through the window. Andy tries to warn Kyle about Chucky, but obviously Kyle doesn't believe him, and then the Simpsons come in and they're like, "Why'd you tie Andy to his bed, Kyle?" And Kyle's like, "I didn't do that," and Andy's like, "Oh, it's Chucky," and then Phil has enough of that shit and takes Chucky and chucks him into the basement. After they leave, Chucky gets up and notices that he has a nosebleed and realizes that he's about to become human and he desperately needs to make the switch. The next day, Andy goes to his first day of school, where Chucky follows him to. Chucky then gets Andy in trouble with his teacher, Miss Kettlewell, after he scribbles "fuck you, bitch" on Andy's paper. Andy finds the Chucky doll and Miss Kettlewell takes it from Andy and chucks it in a closet, locking the closet, and then she locks Andy in the classroom by himself, which I'm not sure is legal. Chucky then tries to get out of the closet to get at Andy, and Andy, being the smartest 8-year-old in the history of the universe, escapes through the window. Miss Kettlewell then comes back into the classroom to see Andy gone, but hears something in the closet. She searches for Andy in the closet and can't find him, but hears Chucky, who stabs her with a bike pump and then beats her to death with a yardstick. Andy, meanwhile, has returned home and is trying to warn the Simpsons about Chucky, who obviously don't believe him, and Phil, upon checking the basement, notices that the Chucky doll is still there where he left it. That night, Phil and Joanne argue, Joanne wanting to give Andy a second chance, while Phil, insistent that Andy needs help, wants to send him away. Andy decides it's time to take matters into his own hands, and later that night, he grabs an electric knife from the kitchen and heads down to the basement to look for Chucky. Chucky quite literally gets the jump on him though, but Andy's able to shake him off using the knife. Hearing the commotion, Phil has come down to the basement and sees Andy standing there holding the knife. Phil starts to slowly walk down the stairs towards Andy, but Chucky trips him from under the stairs and hangs him. Phil then comes face to face with Chucky, realizing that Andy was telling the truth before he's dropped on his neck, which kills him instantly. Joanne immediately comes downstairs to see her dead husband and blames Andy for everything. Well, Joanne is obviously distraught, Kyle doesn't know how to feel, and Andy is being taken back to the foster care by Grace. Kyle then throws the Chucky doll in the outside trash and begins to swing on the swing when she accidentally kicks something up in the dirt below her. She pulls it out of the dirt and turns out it's the Tommy doll with its face bashed in. And she goes to check the trash can, and turns out what she thought was the Tommy doll is gone, and she realizes that Andy was telling the truth. She races upstairs to warn Joanne, but it's too late as Chucky has already gotten to her. Chucky then jumps and disarms Kyle, holding her at knife point, and forces Kyle to drive him to the foster care. Just as they're outside the care though, Kyle decides she needs to do something, so she slams on the brakes, sending Chucky for the windshield. She tries to run Chucky over, but is unsuccessful, and Chucky's able to subdue her once again, and then goes into the care home and pulls the fire alarm. Andy and Grace are the last two downstairs, where they see Kyle standing there holding the Chucky doll, not knowing that Chucky has a knife at the back of her head. Grace takes them all into her office and demands to know what the hell's going on, and then Chucky reveals himself and stabs her to death. Chucky then locks Kyle out of the room and forces Andy to get into the back of a paper truck, which Kyle follows in her car. Kyle then runs the paper truck off the road, but Andy and Chucky have already run off and she pursues on foot. Chucky and Andy arrive back at the Good Guy doll factory, where Chucky knocks Andy unconscious and begins to perform the incantation again. And this time, he finishes it. And it's done, except it didn't work because it's been too much time, and Charles Lee Ray is now trapped in the Chucky doll forever. And you might be surprised to learn the second bit, but he's just a little bit super fucking pissed about it. However, Kyle shows up and drops some boxes on him and then takes Andy, and they try to escape for the factory. After running for the factory a bit, Kyle and Andy start to climb up a conveyor belt, with Chucky right behind in hot pursuit. Before Chucky can get to them, however, Kyle slams a grate down on his hand, trapping it. So Chucky sees no alternative and rips his own hand off, which graphically shows that yeah, he's got human parts under there. Kyle and Andy then climb for a hydraulic eye press to try to get to an exit, which they can't get through. This logjam they've created breaks the machine, and a technician who was in the back comes in to try to fix it. After he does though, he gets slashed by Chucky, who has now fitted the knife into his hand stub, and he gets his eyes pressed, which kills him. Chucky then catches up with Kyle and Andy, who have formed a trap for him, however. He gets nailed down on an assembly line machine and then reversed into a machine that's supposed to rip his body apart. And after the goop comes out, you only see his legs left, so I guess that did the deal. However, the body of Googly Eyes McGee flies in and knocks Kyle unconscious, and turns out it was Chucky who cut his own legs off to escape the machine. He stabs his knife hand into a grate, getting himself stuck, conveniently right under a valve of hot molten plastic, which Andy opens and covers him with. And even wakes up Kyle at the last second and saves her from also being processed by the assembly line. Kyle admires Andy's handiwork and is like, wow, you really killed Chucky. Nope, just kidding, he's not dead, because of course not. Luckily, there's a conveniently placed air pressure hose which Kyle puts in Chucky's mouth, which expands his head until it explodes. Well, that finally did it. That killed Chucky, for this film at least. And Andy and Kyle leave the facility. Andy asks Kyle, where are we going? Kyle's like, we're going home. Andy's like, where's that? She's like, I don't know. And that's the end of the film. And now it is time to pull out our first ever Chucky big board. Now I want to start by saying I have nothing but praise for this film. I love this film. If you like the Child's Play franchise, you're gonna love this film. This is almost as good as the first film. You know, Andy's actor was gotta be one of the best child actors ever. Alex Vincent, he did an incredible job in both films. Brad Dourif as Chucky is hilarious as usual. Christina Elise as Kyle added a lot to this film. I really wish the mom character, I believe it was Catherine Hicks, had returned. Apparently there was plans for her to come back at one point, but they were scrapped. I really wish that she had been in it too. But, you know, Kyle was a good replacement, and this was a good film. However, it wasn't quite as good as the first film. You know, the reasons for bringing him back set up the whole rest of the franchise for better and for worse, and unfortunately a lot of it was for worse. And, you know, it kind of lessened the impact of the first film by just like, oh no, he's still alive, you know, but... you know, it's a stupid slasher movie trope, as I said at the beginning. You know, the villain can never really die, which usually leads to a bunch of crap sequels, which we'll be getting to after this, but this is a very good sequel. It was not as good as the first movie, though, which is why I'm ranking them Child's Play 1, number 1, Child's Play 2, number 2. I mentioned crap sequels, and that's gonna start soon. Did they let Chucky rest after this? You bet your ass they didn't, because 9 months later, they released Child's Play 3, which sucked. And now the only big remaining question is, will it take more or less than 9 months for me to review it? That is a question to be answered at another time. But yeah, whether or not you like this is really just based off what you like. Critics hate slasher movies, so obviously it's got negative reviews, but if you like slasher movies, you're gonna love this film. Like, if you liked the first film, you will like this film. I guarantee you. This still, to this day, might be the best Child's Play sequel. It doesn't have a lot of competition, although the 2 most recent movies were actually very good, I must say. But everything in between this and, I believe, Cult of Chucky was the first sequel. Everything in between this and Cult of Chucky was not great. You know, Child's Play 3 was pretty bad. Bride of Chucky was and Seed of Chucky was just Jesus Christ. But this film held up to the original. Wasn't as good, but it definitely made the original proud. And if you're a fan of slashers, and if you're a fan of the first film, then you're gonna love this, I guarantee you. And to be honest, my biggest critique of this film is, again, just going back to the thing. It's not really anything about the film in itself. It's just more the stupid slasher trope that the villain can never die. You know what it leads to, you know? I understand they want to make sequels and they want to make a franchise, but that doesn't work. When has that ever worked out, you know? I mean, look at what, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street turned into in later years, and Friday the 13th, and Halloween's touch and go there for a bit, like, and this was no exception either. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like, it's the curse of slasher movies. The villain can never die, so therefore, we're meant to make crap sequels forever. But in the midst of those crap sequels, we do get some good sequels, and much like, you know, Halloween 2 and Friday the 13th 2, this was also very good. And speaking of A Nightmare on Elm Street, next week we'll be looking at A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Oh boy. That is going to do it, however, for me today. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a like. If you didn't like it, don't. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're all in the video description down below. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting me and my channel. I appreciate you guys. Of all that being said, though, my name is Noah Taff. This has been my review, or Chucky look back, I should say, at Child's Play 2, released in 1990, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.